What's up, everyone? It's your boy Richard Graves, the Richard Graves Group. First of all, please like and subscribe on our YouTube channel. We're going to be coming at you every Sunday at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. Normally, I'd have my guy, Jonathan Golden, as a contributor on. He'll be on next week. Something came up with him today. So I'm not going to touch on all the subjects he and I were going to talk about, but I am going to touch on one particular subject. And that is the current American descendants of slavery movement and also the foundational Black American movement. Now, this is important because this is really affecting the modern political landscape in America and even to some degree the geopolitical landscape as far as what's going on between Black people in the Caribbean, Afro-Latinos, and Africans in Africa and African immigrants to the United States. These two movements and the one organization have a lot to do with what's going on with the current discussion about reparations here in the United States. So I'm going to touch on it a little bit. I've interacted with some of these folks on Twitter, some on Facebook. So I want to, put some information out there because a lot of people don't know what's going on with these type of movements and what they're really about. And I'm just going to touch on a few things. Now, you got the ADOS, the American Descendants of Slavery Movement. All right. They have a political agenda. They do have leadership. They do have, the organization does have conferences from time to time. Now, the foundational Black American movement is something that refers to the culture and language, nationality. It's not a group organization particularly. And that group or that particular movement was initiated by Tariq Nasheed. Some of you might have heard of him. He's a film producer and author and has a radio show. With the ADOS movement, you have some leadership, Yvette Carnell and Antonio Moore. It is a political movement centered around lineage, reparations, and the Black agenda for African Americans. So that in and of itself is not a bad thing. I think we can all agree that we as Black people in the United States need to be able to work together towards different things. And I've always been a proponent of saying that African Americans who tend to be normally Democrats need to be a group that votes for what's in the best interest of the group. And if it's the Democrats or the Republicans or conservatives or the liberals or the libertarians or the Green Party, whoever is doing what's best for our demographic is the people that we should be supporting. And that also depends on what community we're in. Obviously, African Americans in Chicago and Baltimore might have some similar issues, but they may have some specific issues that are specific to those particular individual communities, as it is in Atlanta or Philadelphia, or wherever there's a concentration of African Americans voting, where our vote makes a difference in those areas. Today, I'm going to talk specifically about this ever increasing idea that I'm hearing from people in ADOS and people who identify as FBA, and that's of this indigenous American idea regarding Black people in America. Now, let me give you guys some background first. Once upon a time, African Americans, Black people in America, had issues with African immigrants, and African immigrants had issues with African Americans. Now, the African immigrants coming to the United States had an idea, a view that African Americans possibly are lazy and not benefiting from all that we have at our hands, and most immigrant groups feel that way about Native Americans, or I should say not Native Americans, but Americans who have been in America, be it Black, white, whatever, that, we don't appreciate the privileges we have here. Obviously, a lot of times these people coming from third world countries with abject poverty at levels that, we may not understand or we don't see. So that caused some tension. And also, I believe media depiction of African Americans as drug dealers and gangbangers and criminals, and be it from music or from movies, or however they're getting it, I think is jades people's opinions about African Americans throughout the world, even in African countries and in Afro-Caribbean countries and for the Afro-Latino population. So this created a situation that we had, I would say, all the way up until probably the mid 90s, where you have Caribbean people that come in from Haiti or Trinidad or wherever, and they would try to separate themselves or distance themselves from African Americans, and in some cases act as if they were superior. The same thing would happen with African immigrants from Nigeria or Ghana or Sierra Leone or Ethiopia. These groups would try to separate themselves and make themselves distinct from African Americans. And honestly, that's that old no man wants to be the lowest man on the totem pole. Now, of course, African Americans have been supportive of all things African or within the diaspora for quite some time. We were at the forefront against apartheid in South Africa. We're in the forefront for the treatment of blacks in Democratic Republic of the Congo, in Nigeria, wherever black people had issues, we usually took, politically to that. With the Afro-Caribbean community and the Afro-Latino community, for various reasons, there was a disconnect with the African Latino community. I think a lot of it was that Afro-Latinos tended to identify more with their nationality, be they Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, or Cubans, more so than with their blackness, even though they generally had an understanding of their African ancestry. Now, I give you guys all that to let you know that is the basis of a lot of tension between African Americans as a group, Afro-Latinos, Afro-Caribbeans, and African immigrants. And then there's the perception issue. A lot of African Americans were under the belief that Africans didn't like black people in America, thought they were better than us. And I'm sure there was some of that. But for the most part, I think once people actually started going to Africa to travel, I think they found out differently that when you go to Africa, people do tend to embrace us. And, and Africans had their own problems. So they weren't really abreast to our problems the same we weren't abreast to theirs until you get to around the 60s. I mean, there were people who knew about the colonialism aspect. And of course, there were Africans that understood the extent of the transatlantic slave trade and the effect on African American people. But nonetheless, there was a disconnect there. I believe during the 90s, during the movements of actually the music movements of Public Enemy, X-Clan, Rakim, Paris from out in Oakland, I believe that this brought a level of consciousness to black people about the diaspora. And I think it brought a level of consciousness with this music being exported to other parts of the diaspora, be it the Caribbean, South or Central America, or Africa itself. So you begin to see Afro-Latinos, some of them identifying more as black, Afro-Caribbeans in some cases identifying as black, even though, of course, everybody was well aware of their nationality being Haitian or Jamaican or whatever their nationality is. Which brings us to the ADOS and FBA movements. These are movements that stress our nationality as African Americans, which I have no problem with. I think that's a great thing. However, what you're seeing now is arguments about reparations, who should get them, who qualifies, who's a true African American, that African immigrants shouldn't get reparations, and Afro-Caribbeans and Afro-Latinos shouldn't get reparations. Now, to me, and be honest with you, I think that's arguing over monopoly money. And what I mean by that is, while I can agree all day that maybe reparations are something that's owed, we can say that. Let's say I agree with that argument. I think that at some point we have to deal with the actual social, political, social economic issue that it's just something that's not going to happen. And what I mean by that is you have African Americans in these movements who will say that the United States is a systemically, institutionally racist country. And they'll go even further than that to say that the primary predicate of white Americans is racism against blacks. Yet at the same time, somehow convince themselves that seeking reparations is something you can get from a country that you believe is anti-black racist to get you against you at base. That in itself is not logical, but which brings me to the point of it being an emotional argument. Um, I would argue left and right that the people who survived some of the atrocities from the race riots in the early 1900s, some of those people still alive, at least some of their children and grandchildren are alive. I believe they definitely deserve direct reparations for what happened to them. As far as us as African Americans, from our 40 acres of mules that we didn't get, yeah, do we deserve to get it? Yes. How that would actually happen, I don't know. But I'm going to say this in regard to that. We can keep chasing this idea and fantasy of reparations. And I don't mean to be insulting of people when I say it's land of make believe, but it is. Or we can look at our place in American society now as African Americans and look at what we have, our millionaires and billionaires, our doctors and lawyers and teachers and social workers and lawyers and DJs and producers, whatever. We have a broad community across this country. And we can think about if we're going to work together in that way in our communities that we're in, the African American community in DC or Chicago or Atlanta. That's something we need to look at. Are we going to work to raise the flag together as a group with what we have, or are we going to sit around and wait till we get this reparations that I don't believe is something that will ever manifest? But that's a different discussion that I'll talk about deeper at a later time. Right now, I want to talk about this idea. You have some African Americans so, in my opinion, ashamed of being African, or not ashamed, but more or less maybe resentful because they don't feel embraced by Africans. They've created this land of make believe fantasy that African American people were native to the United States. Let me be clear. This is not saying that this is not talking about those of us with Native American or Amerindian ancestry. This is saying that as melanated Black people, we were native to this country. Now, don't get me wrong, in the grand odd chance that, boats made it across the Great Pond, the Great Atlantic Pond from the west coast of Africa to South and Central America or the Caribbean or even North America, if that happened, I would believe genetically those groups that got here, if they survived, probably do not, how should I say it? It's not a significant part of the gene pool or isn't even able to be detected. But let me give you guys a visual so I can see what I'm talking about. That is a map of the transatlantic slave trade. As you see looking at it, you see the path of the slave boats that left the Americas from the mid 15 or left Africa to the Americas on the Atlantic from the mid 1500s all the way up until approximately the beginning of the 19th century. The people who were kidnapped from Africa and made slaves were taken from West and South Africa for the most part, and some places on East Africa as well. Now you see the paths up and through the Caribbean, all right, down through, and this would have been probably the first primary path by the Portuguese to South and Central America, Brazil, where you had people that were taken from Africa and brought to these parts, people taken from Africa brought up here, and then people taken from Africa brought to the Caribbean and Mexico, and people taken from Africa brought to North America, the United States, and Canada, which I believe was probably the last wave. In any case, this is why we have a shared ancestry with Africa and why we have a shared ancestry with people in the Caribbean, South and Central America, parts of Mexico, and in Canada, we as African Americans. Now, this is something that's pretty easy to figure out with a genetic test, but people are holding on to this fantasy that we are just the Native American Blacks. We were here before anybody else got here. And I hate to say it, I understand why this mythology and this fairy tale is made up because people are afraid of the blackness, afraid of being from Africa, or trying to distance themselves from people who they felt might have abandoned them or who are not embracing them. And it's really sad that we have this where we have the technology and the understanding of history to understand our true ancestry from Africa and to understand that that is where our primary ancestry comes from. I say primary because most of us on this side of the Great Pond have ancestry from Europeans, Amerindian groups, and in some cases, Asians. And that's just reality of the situation. But for the most part, what makes us Black people is the fact that we are descendants of the people who were kidnapped and enslaved from Africa. Why this is such a big problem for us to accept is beyond me. Now, don't get me wrong. I understand we are from different nationalities. We have those of us are from America, some from Canada, some from Mexico, some from Cuba, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, Haiti, and then down in Brazil and Colombia and Argentina. You're going to find Black people throughout the diaspora, throughout the Americas. And that's who we are. Now, there's people that don't like the fact that, we are all Black people, that want to say it's just us in America as Black people and distances ourselves from all the other groups. We could do that. We could do that predicated on we may feel that that's how they did us. But at the end of the day, well, we have a lot of things in common, a lot of things we can learn and support from each other. Let me put this map up again. I want you to think about the fact that if those of us in the diaspora began to do business with our brothers and sisters in the Caribbean, in South and Central America, and in Africa, and they do business with us as well, we could create economies with each other if we chose to. But it seems as if we bought into the idea that we're stronger separate than we are together. And it's odd that we were just now coming together in the late 90s and early 2000s. Now you have this movement that's trying to separate us all over again, arguing over monopoly money, arguing over past grievances. And at the end of the day, we just need to sit down and have that discussion, who we are. I'm proud to be an African American, but I'm also very understanding of the fact that if it's not obvious from my phenotype, that genetically that I do have ancestry from the people of West and South Africa. And I don't see any shame in that. I take great pride in that. I take great pride in my slave ancestors who survived for me to be here to have this conversation with you guys. So in any case, I'm not going to beat a dead horse, but that was just a bit of an educational video so we can understand who we are, who our ancestors are, our shared ancestry with our brothers and sisters in South and Central America, whether they be Afro-Caribbean or Afro-Latinos. And yes, I do know there are some Afro-Latinos who are not going to claim us, and that's fine. Let them be. But for the ones who do embrace their African ancestry and who do embrace their relation to us because of it, then we need to embrace them back. We need to stop worrying about who doesn't accept us and who does, and focus on who does, and who does, even in the United States or outside of it, for us to work together and build towards something. Or, those of you who want to wait around for the land of make-believe reparations, then wait for it. I, for one, am not going to wait for something to come if we can choose to work together and build. I hope that we all decide to build with each other, build businesses, build relationships, build community, build respect for each other, bring our positives to the table and work on our negatives together as groups, wherever we're at. Like I said, African Americans in Chicago might group together and focus on certain things that African Americans in Baltimore won't have to. And then for those things that we share, we talk to each other. There's things that we share in common with the Afro-Caribbeans, people in Jamaica and Haiti, going through different things that we can learn from each other and share with each other. And then we can reach back to the motherland, Africa, and, work with the people in Sierra Leone or in Liberia or in Ghana who actually offer us joint citizenship, dual citizenship, who welcome us back to invest and build there. Instead of staying with the fantasies or saying and then holding on to the grievances of the past, let's work together and build something. Brother, the next plan used to say, are you working to raise the flag? That's what it comes down to. We got our red, black, and green here in the United States. They have their red and green and yellow and red, green, and gold in other places, or even green and white. The colors are all over. But we can actually work together in a Pan-African way. And instead of trying to work in our isolated ways and like I said, there's nothing wrong with working towards African-American goals while other people are working on theirs. But there's no need for us to be enemies. There's no need for us to be antagonistic of each other. There's no need for us to undermine each other or to insult each other or discredit each other. There's room for all of that, but again, like I said, it seems to me funny that people want to separate us now once you get to a point where people are actually starting to understand our common ancestry. That being said, I'm going to keep this one short. We're going to do this every Sunday. Of course, follow, subscribe, go to the Twitter page, follow us on Facebook, whatever you do. But we're going to be really doing a lot of things. The music show will be kicking off next week. I think I'm going to get to interview Carl Bias. Looking forward to interviewing my kid, Man Wilson, again for our music show, Man Parrish, and many others. Looking forward to that. That's on our other channel, which I'll be promoting later. But as for the Richard Graves Group channel, we know we're going to keep it with geopolitics, race, religion, discussing world affairs, and discussing the world. So thanks again for tuning in. I hope to see you all soon. And again, please remember to like and subscribe. Peace.